Good evening and welcome to another edition of Napa Newsmakers. I'm Henry Mikulski and I'll be your host this evening, and what we hope will be a lively, interesting discussion. We've got two outstanding young ladies here with us, both from Napa High School, Jillian Johns and Emma Lipp. Both gave incredibly articulate speeches at the Peace and Unity Ceremony and Candlelight Walk that was held on the 19th of September, about a week or 10 days after the infamous now bombing of the World Trade Center, that event that really has changed all of our lives. They are newsmakers because of not only what they said and how they said it, but the reaction that it drew from the community. So I've invited them to come here and talk to you. A little bit about Jillian. She's an outstanding senior at Napa High School. This is just a brief resume. She's a mock trial member. She's a junior statesman, editor of the school paper, Beat of the Drum. She's the Associated Student Body Treasurer. She's a member of Interact Club, an honor student, soon to be an intern with Congressman Thompson. So much going on with Jillian. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Also with us, junior at Napa High School, Emma Lipp. Emma is currently the Associated Student Body Director of Buildings and Grounds. She's the president of Interact. She's with Best Buddies, which pairs up students with the special ed students, and that's wonderful. She's also a member of the mock trial, and currently I'm delighted to announce she's got the leading role in the school play Anne Frank, The Diary of Anne Frank, and you're going to be Anne Frank.
Yes.
I want to welcome both of you to the show, and thank you for being here, and thank you for your involvement with the community. Our first question is, just tell us, first of all, both of you can talk, where were you when you heard the news of the airplane smashing into the World Trade Towers and the Pentagon? How did you get the news, first of all?
Well, I heard it while I was at school. We heard it from different students who had just heard brief glimpses of what had happened, and then we had an Interact board meeting at lunch, and while we were there we had the television on with the news on, and we were able to watch the news and see what had happened. And it was pretty
Do you remember
terrifying.
your first instinct when you heard that hijacked airplanes smashed into that building? Your first thought or instinct or emotion, the very first, when you saw that?
Well, it was very confusing. For me, panic was a big emotion, just not knowing what had gone on, what had happened, what to do, if anyone had been killed, what kind of, just what had happened.
Nothing like that had ever happened before. It's pretty amazing. We're still in a state of shock, I think, all of us.
I heard the news before I was getting ready to go to school, and I got a call from my friend, and she was like, "Oh, watch the news, watch the news. I don't think I'm going to school today." Everyone was so panicked and frightened, and it was very scary to watch it on TV, and it was very emotional.
So in your household, the telephone rang? It wasn't mom or dad or your
My
brother?
dad called too afterwards, but a friend called first.
And said, watch the news. And,
Yeah.
and what were some of your thoughts when you saw those incredibly graphic images especially when the World Trade Towers came down? What were some of your thoughts?
It was very sad. I was just at the World Trade Center a few months ago, and it was just wrenches at your heart.
It's horrifying. They showed it over and over again on television. It wasn't an image any of us could get away from. Even when we didn't have the television on in front of us, it was still very much a part of our everyday lives.
Still to this day, when they show it on TV, I'm just drawn to it. I can't divert my eyes. I'm just horrified that this could happen. Do you feel the same? Are you drawn to it? Are you just looking at it, or have you had enough of this already?
Well, personally, I think I would like to, I don't want to see it anymore. I've seen enough of it. I think it's been commercialized, but obviously at first it was very important that all of us see it just as Americans, that we know of the horrible tragedy that had occurred.
How has it been commercialized?
I would say I've probably seen that 20-second clip about 50 times.
And used to promote this waving of the American flag, perhaps?
No, I think it's wonderful that we've had the waving of the American flag, as you put it, but I don't think that anyone should commercialize the tragedy or the losses of the many lives.
Yeah. I think that I just agree with Jillian that it's been going on for 3 weeks now, and we've want to move on. But
Yeah, they're starting to exploit the victims.
You know, they were saying on
stories.
TV that in each tower about 50,000 people, that 100,000 people go through there. I was amazed that the final numbers are around 7,000 combined for all three. And I think we give a lot of credit to the heroic firemen who went into that building again and again and pulled out people. They are really the heroes of this, and Mayor Giuliani to some extent.
definitely.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the candlelight vigil march. You're calling it the Peace and Unity Ceremony and Candlelight Walk.
Yeah.
How was that organized? Can you talk about that? Who organized it? How was it? How were you contacted?
Well,
Well, the
day,
two of us
the
did.
day of the attacks, Jillian and I were talking on the phone and just wanted to do something. We felt that it was very important that something happened in our school and our community, that we showed how much we were affected and how much support we gave, and to calm our emotions down too. And so we immediately started organizing Red Cross fundraising and what came to be the ceremony.
That's right. We had been talking on the phone, and for both of us, our first reaction was, well, what can we do? So we threw out a few ideas. We got a list of ideas, and we called up Jennifer Cole, the Dean of Activities at Napa High School, and we discussed it with her, and we also spoke with Kathy Dickey, who's the Interact advisor. And with the two organizations, with leadership and with Interact, we were able to pull this all together.
You know, some of the comments in the newspapers afterwards really extolled the fact that this was student-led. It wasn't the mayor and our politicians and the old clerics and stuff. This was really student-led. And it wasn't just Napa High School. It was really students from all the schools, Napa, Vintage, Temescal, New Tech, all of them worked together. So did you contact the other schools as well?
Yes,
Their
we did.
activity directors? And
Well, we
How
made a
did you-
point of that. In the beginning, our idea was to have a vigil just at Napa High School with the Napa High School students. And eventually it grew into a community-wide event. And we didn't want to limit it to Napa High School. So we called up, Emma actually did, all the other ASB officers of the rest of the schools in the Napa Valley Unified School District.
there was about 1,500 people there, wouldn't you say? Is that what the newspaper said?
I guess. I'm not
And
sure.
for me, the most moving part, and I'm not saying this to boost your egos or anything, but your speeches, both of you, were just
Thank you.
incredible. Yours, I liked the way you delivered, and a very methodic. With the rests, you stopped at every sentence, and you really delivered a very powerful speech. One of our administrators at Napa High said you could have just handed that to the president, and it was that well polished and delivered. Yours was more on the emotional side. You were so caught up in what you were saying. You finished your speech, but it was almost in tears. You got pretty caught up in what you were saying.
I guess I meant it.
Yeah, obviously you did. Well, what was the general reaction among your peers, especially once you delivered your speeches, your very well thought out speeches? And by the way, how did you prepare for your speeches? How long did you have, and did you look at references? Did you talk to people? Where did you get your ideas that you would put into your presentations?
My speech was not originally intended to be a speech. It was just sort of thoughts that I kept writing on my computer as the week progressed. And then I decided to sort of mash them all together and use it at our ceremony, because I decided I felt I wanted to speak them.
Did you check them with anybody first, or did you run it by your parents or some teacher or some adults? Anybody at all, or?
I read it to Jillian.
Uh-huh.
We both read each other our speeches. I know I didn't read it to anyone else.
Okay. So this was new, and no one censored it. No one said you can't say such and such, or you should say so and so.
No.
You were free to
I
say
made a
whatever you
couple
wanted.
of comments.
But no, I didn't cut anything out.
Okay. And the same with you. Did you talk to anybody?
Well-
How did you prepare for your talk?
Well, I knew I wanted to speak from the beginning, but I didn't know definitely if I would have the opportunity to speak. So I really waited until the last minute to put the speech together. But I spoke with Steve Strong, our ASB president, and Emma Lip, who was also speaking. It was the three of us from Napa High School. And that's you. And we decided we didn't all want to speak on the same topic. So we decided, well, Steve wanted to speak about unity, and Emma wanted to speak about peace. So I thought, well, what can I talk about? That's everything we have to say. This is a peace and unity ceremony. And I decided, well, strength. This was a horrible tragedy. We need to speak about strength during these times. And I originally wanted to use different quotes. I went online and looked up some quotes by Winston Churchill and Martin Luther King. And ironically, Mayor Giuliani later on in his speech used Winston Churchill's quote that I had planned for my speech. So I took that out because
Oh, you took it out?
I took it out.
Which quote is that?
Oh, I'd misquote it.
Something about blood, sweat,
About
and tears,
courage.
and courage, and we can take it, yeah, how he rallied the British people. So what quotes did you use?
I used a quote by Helen Keller at the end, because that hadn't been used, saying, "Although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of the overcoming of it." And I thought that that was very nice. It was simple, but it was also to the point.
And you mentioned how we felt about the reactions to our speeches. And I, personally, did not know what the reaction to my speech would be. As you mentioned, my speech was rather emotional, and it was about peace. When Julian and I discussed our speeches together, I really was unsure of whether I should read it or not in some aspects because I was not sure about the reaction to it. And I was very glad I did, and I was pleased that many people actually did come up to talk to me and told me that they felt the same way and was happy that somebody had said it. So it was nice. I wasn't expecting it, so.
Were you emotional while you were writing the speech? Did you know that,
No.
that you couldn't go on? I mean, you got a lot of support. I mean, you got a standing ovation. People stood up and they just cheered for you.
I didn't know.
There was one line here especially that I'd like to read that I found rather interesting. You said, "If our president truly wants America to fight a war against terrorism, that war must be fought without hate, without violence, and without more innocent victims being affected for the sake of political statements." That's caused some reaction in our own local press. People saying, you know, you're young, you're naive, that this is a war that requires retaliation.
Yeah, I got called a traitor in the paper like 2 days ago or something. I thought that was an interesting one.
How can you be a traitor?
I don't know.
What's the mood on campus? How would you characterize students your age generally at Napa High School with regards to the events of September 11th and our imminent reaction? Just generally, what's the general reaction to the events?
A lot of students are, as with many issues in a lot of world affairs, uninformed or don't really care, very apathetic. And then there's the students that do care, and that the adult world is sort of surprised and disregards how much they do care. And I think I heard a lot of inappropriate comments about the bombings on the attacks the first day. You know, oh, that World Trade Center, it wasn't good for anything anyway, those sort of things. And it was very hard to hear, and, you know, of course, to tell them to stop saying that.
Well, you hear different opinions. There are the people who really don't care, who are very apathetic about the entire situation. But then there are also the people who, you know, like the leadership class at Napa High, who heard it and immediately felt obligated to do something. And
so you've got the entire spectrum, from apathy to activism.
Absolutely.
As is the rest of the world.
How do you explain apathy? I mean, it's such a horrendous situation that we were bombed here at home. This is not some foreign thing in the press that we don't know about anyway. But how do you explain apathy on such a big topic that hit us so personally at home?
I don't think a lot of people realized the depth of the issue at the beginning. I think, like anything that makes the front page of the paper immediately, it didn't immediately sink in to most people. And then as the week progressed and the numbers greatened, I think it sunk in.
Well, we're also 3,000 miles away. We are America, and obviously the attack was closer to home than anything else we've ever experienced. But we are still 3,000 miles away. We're on the other side of the country, and there are very few people who are directly affected by it. So unfortunately, because they weren't directly affected by it, they didn't put the thought into it that was deserved.
You're right. I had one of my students, one of a freshman, say something like, "Well, that's New York. That's really far away. That's you know, as if it were another country," and that's part of the stigma of our own education system, I think, is that anything that goes on beyond our own borders is just not important to most Americans, especially young people. It's kind of a criticism against young people. Not you. You're obviously attuned.
I wouldn't say
and involved.
not just young people. I think a lot of Americans, most people in the world don't fully appreciate the issues that affect the rest of the world.
Well, this is definitely a wake-up call. America really got it over the head this time. The U.S. cold, no reaction almost. Our embassies in Africa were hit. In fact, the World Trade Center was hit back in 1993. Yeah. And we were really ill-prepared for this one, and we just never thought that it would come home this hard. We're definitely awake now. You see all the flags out there, and people are just hungering for almost some kind of reaction. I think you, Emma, more than anybody, would identify, and correct me if I'm not right, with the so-called peace movement that we see emerging, especially on the campuses of the United States, this nation movement. What is this peace movement, and what do they actually want? What are they saying?
Well, I can't really speak for most people, but I think a lot of the peace movements have actually been sort of disregarded as radicals who don't want to do anything for this issue and who want to let the perpetrators of the crime just slide. And I think that's incorrect. I think most people who know anything about these attacks are very passionate about wanting them never to happen again, and which is basically the basis of peace anyway, you know, no more violence. And I think that people don't appreciate how much peace movements are about stopping violence and stopping these attacks from ever happening again, and which is really the basis why a lot of people want war too. And I think in some ways those two movements can see eye to eye, and right now they're not.
You know, there's one letter in particular, I've got some quotes here. This is Hal Leggett, who I don't know, but he wrote a piece in the Napa Register that says, "Peace marchers won't win the war." And I'd like to read you just a couple lines, and I'd like your reaction, please, okay? Sure. He says here, "If in the process of hunting terrorists down, innocent people die, that is part of war. Do I want innocent civilians to die in the process? No. But war is not pretty, it's hell. So to all the peace marchers, it is nice you have utopian ideals, and that as Americans you're able to assemble and sing Kumbaya and tell stories that we should not retaliate in response to the September 11th terrorist attacks. As Americans, that's your right." He says, however, don't ever forget that right, in other words, the right for you to sing Kumbaya and peace and love and all that.
Have utopian ideals.
Right, okay. He says that right, he doesn't want you to forget, was obtained via the sacrifices of lives of thousands upon thousands of men and women throughout history of this country. Unlike you, they were willing to lay down their lives to defend that right, your right to protest, I guess. Freedom has a very high price to pay. What's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, this whole letter I had sort of a not so kind immediate thought about, because there were some definite comments directed at our ceremony that were sort of unfounded. I think that comment, the first part of it, showing that yes, nobody wants war, nobody wants innocent people killed, and I hope that's the right idea. You know, I think when I was saying that the war wanters and the peace movement is sort of can see eye to eye, because nobody wants any more people to be killed. But I think that the assemblages of Kumbaya and utopian ideals is not exactly what the peace movement is.
Go on.
I think that maybe people are misunderstanding the purpose of this ceremony. My beliefs, for example, are not those of Emma's. This ceremony wasn't about peace. It wasn't our political views, this is what America should do. It was a chance for the community to bond together, to band together. It was, if we were preaching peace, then that's fine. But in my opinion, it was more about unity. It was a chance for us as Americans to get together and stand up and be strong.
And that's one of the silver linings we're seeing here. Not just the flags, but we're more gentle with one another. We're patient, more patient, I think. We're more understanding. We're reevaluating our priorities as Americans. I loved the fact that the band was there, the choir sang, and I don't know, I've never thought I had such patriotic feelings, but I get broken up when I hear America the Beautiful.
Well, absolutely.
I mean, it's really bringing us all together. We needed that ceremony, didn't we? I think.
I think so. I'm a 16-year-old girl, and I've never had the chance to experience anything like this. I've never seen
Thank
this,
God.
well, this
Yeah.
patriotism.
Right.
It was a tragic event, and it was horrible, and I would never wish it upon anybody. But fortunately, America has been able to do good out of it. We've been able to take this tragedy and make it into something good. We've been able to, I think, be more patriotic than ever. I've never in my life seen an American flag on every corner, or the American flags on the back of pickup trucks driving down the street. And it's really touching, it really is. It's really nice to see.
But okay, so what should be the reaction? We've got the flags out, we feel unified, we feel strong. How do you respond to something so unspeakable as the acts of September the 11th?
Oh, I think one thing that's been a definite plus about America's reaction is sort of the forum that has come out, like our ceremony, where people did talk about their opinions, and in the newspapers there's been lots of different commentaries, because people are very passionate in all their different ways about it, and should be, and should have the right to express it. And I think that we've done a pretty good job so far as a country of trying to get a feel for what we should do and not just immediately reacting. In the first few days there were sort of some comments made and some harsh judgments on people that needed a couple days to settle down first.
I think even our president has toned down the rhetoric some. But what should be the response? I mean, you don't favor all-out war, obviously.
No.
So how do you deal with Osama bin Laden, the Taliban, the other extremists in that part of the world, the other terrorist groups? What do you do? I mean, I know you're 16 years old. You're not in the State Department. You don't have an answer. But what do you feel should be done?
Go ahead.
Well, my opinion is not necessarily of peace, and that we just allow it to happen. I definitely think that retaliation is called for. That's my personal opinion. The term I've heard most is the knee-jerk reaction, which is something I definitely agree that we need to try to avoid. It definitely, whatever we do needs to be thought out and well planned.
And it seems like our planners are holding something in surprise, because we haven't seen any big event yet.
I think, I agree with Jillian that something needs to be done. I don't think that we need to sit here and let this happen.
Sure.
I hope that our country can deal with the problem without hurting as few civilians as we possibly can. I think that it's time for us to do something about the Taliban and in Afghanistan. I think that there's a lot of oppressed people there that we should be helping anyway. And now that we have sort of a personal incentive, I think it's a good opportunity. And hopefully Osama bin Laden and the terrorists can be found out and stopped. But hopefully it can happen with as little war as possible.
Sure.
Well, nobody wants to see any lives lost.
I want to ask you a question. I know this is really difficult for young people, and because you ought to be thinking about dating and the senior prom and your whole life's
Oh,
career.
we're thinking about that, don't worry.
Good, because everything in balance. However, a Republican congressman last week said something quite startling that's been on the air quite a lot. He said something like, it's not even a question of if, but these terrorist cells operating in about 60 countries right now are planning biological, chemical, nuclear, some kind of major event that's going to even make what happened in New York look like a child's play. How do you react to that when he says it's not even a question of if, it's only a question of where, when, and to what extent?
I think that we need to work on our relations with other countries, and hopefully, there will always be somebody that hates a country or a group of people in a country. But as a country, we can work on communicating with the world, on not hurting each other and just getting along.
Unfortunately, I don't think that that's necessarily practical. We have to be realistic. We can't expect that we can reason with these people. From what I've seen, it doesn't look like reasoning with them is even feasible. So it's really frightening to know that this is something that my generation is going to have to deal with.
Yeah, so one writer, Friedman, for the New York Times, called it World War III. Do you support or do you support the president when he said something like, this is non-negotiable. We make certain demands. We're not asking, we're not suggesting. We want the Taliban and all of his people, and we're not. And this is non-negotiable, he said. Is that a good tactical kind of way to go about dealing with these adversaries?
Well, I think we need to be strong.
Yeah.
When we make demands, they need to be met. We can't go about it, well, this is how I feel and this is what I want.
I would
and
really,
if you
really like
disagree-
it if you stop hurting our people.
So the president's providing leadership. Do you agree when he says, these are our demands and they're non-negotiable? He came across pretty strong, didn't he?
Yeah.
And I think that under these circumstances, we need to be stronger than ever. When we make demands, they need to be met, or we need to do something about it.
Okay, in the few remaining minutes, I want to talk a little bit about some domestic politics. The Attorney General, John Ashcroft, is asking Congress to enact legislation that would essentially curtail our civil liberties that, this letter writer said we fought so hard to get. In other words, to catch these people among us, they would read emails, they would listen in on conversations. We're going to tighten up the borders. We're going to especially look at Middle Eastern students that come over here on student visas. The question, simply put, is would you sacrifice some of your civil liberties for more security to catch these guys? Would you sacrifice some of your rights as Americans?
Well, it's a question of peace versus freedom, and obviously it's not that black and white. It's not that clear cut. We definitely need to make sacrifices in both areas to make gains in both areas. Specifically, it's difficult to deal with because, as Americans, none of us want to give up any of our freedom, our individual liberties, but we also need to know that we're protected in our own countries.
So where do you come down on this?
Where do I come down on this?
Would you give up some of your individual liberties?
I think we need to in some cases, not in all cases.
In order to catch, quote, the bad
I
guys?
disagree. I mean, I agree that there's going to be sacrifices that need to be made, but, I mean, Henry, you look a tad Middle Eastern to me. I think that they need to lock you up.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It can't be that extreme.
I was stopped the other day because...
Well, that's my point. And
So what?
it could come down to that. And for people to judge that harshly and that quickly could be dangerous, especially to America.
I think right here in Napa, a Mexican man was beat up because they thought he was Iranian.
A man was murdered in Arizona.
Yeah, you wouldn't give the government that kind of extraordinary power to root out
No, never.
Okay. And some have even gone as far, university campuses, especially some of the more Ivy League schools, Berkeley, they're saying, well, we deserved it. We got what we deserved because we're a decadent, immoral society that spread our poison all over the world. We're an introspective society. We're a free society where everyone can air their points of view.
Yeah.
And, let's hope, let's pray that we're successful in rooting out terrorism. Are you with me on this one? That we can root out the scourge?
Absolutely.
And that we can get back to some sort of normality.
Hopefully so.
I hope so too. It's been a pleasure talking
Thank
to
you
both
very
of you.
much.
Anything you want to say in closing real quick?
No.
No.
I think I've said too much already.
I don't think so. And I feel secure as an old man right now. I feel secure knowing that there's the Emma Lips and the Jillian Joneses out there. You're going to be the next generation that's going to lead us hopefully towards a more peaceful, unified world. No, I have a lot of confidence in you. It gives me a lot of hope to know that people like you are out there, taking it upon yourselves to call these candlelight walks, whatever you've done. I have a lot of respect for the two of you.
Thank you.
And I feel good knowing you're out there leading me when I'm in my old age. So I want to thank you both very much for being here and for everything you've done. Keep up the good work, keep up the activism, and thank you so much. I'm Henry Mikulski. This has been Napa Newsmakers. We've been talking to Emma Lip and Jillian Jones. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of Valley Views with County Supervisor Bill.